Welcome back to Everyday A&P. Today we're going to be continuing our series and discussing the organelles that are found within the eukaryotic cell. In the previous video, we discussed the nucleus and we covered its functions and what it does to help the cell survive and replicate. Today we're going to be covering the mitochondria, and this is often probably one of the more popular organelles that is known in the eukaryotic cell, mostly because we know and we've been taught since maybe middle school, and we've carried it on to throughout high school and maybe even college. We know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. What does that mean? Well, the mitochondria is responsible for generating this high energy molecule known as ATP. And when we look at the mitochondria right here, right, we know that it develops and it it generates this molecule of ATP, otherwise known as adenosine triphosphate. The tri means that we have three phosphate groups that are going to be bonded to an adenosine molecule that generates this larger ATP molecule. Now, when we talk about energy production, there are three different forms of energy production that we could encounter when we talk about the mitochondria. The first being the citric acid cycle, also known as the Krebs cycle. Now, this is going to be one of the largest cycles that you might learn in your biology class. It's a little complex. We won't get into it just yet. When we go a little deeper into energy production and aerobic respiration, we'll get into that. But this is just something for your understanding that this is something that generates ATP. Another form is beta oxidation. Beta oxidation is used to generate ATP from fatty acids. So we don't look at the other macromolecules such as proteins and carbohydrates when we talk about beta oxidation. And the last one being oxidative phosphorylation. Oxidative phosphorylation is also another way of generating ATP within the mitochondria. The one thing that we should also take note is that the citric acid cycle and oxidative phosphorylation deal with carbohydrates. They generate ATP from carbohydrates. So let's put it down here. Citric acid cycle and oxidative phosphorylation equals carbohydrates. And beta oxidation is with, as it's stated here, fatty acids. So we can assume fats, fatty acids. All right. So that's a little bit about the mitochondria and what it does to help the cell survive. It generates ATP. It provides the cell with energy. Now, looking a little deeper into the mitochondria, first and foremost, we need to understand that the mitochondria has two membranes. We can see by the purple layer right here and then the pink peachish layer that we see on the inside. Easy enough, both of these layers are referred to as the outer membrane or the outer mitochondrial membrane and the inner membrane or the inner mitochondrial membrane. Now, both of these membranes are composed of a phospholipid bilayer. Now, you might automatically connect that, wait, the cell membrane is also composed of a phospholipid bilayer. So we will look into that in a little bit. One other thing that we need to also be aware of is that the mitochondria has its own special DNA known as mitochondrial DNA. And if you want to write in short form, mtDNA. So the mitochondria has its own DNA, known as mitochondrial DNA. Now, we have one other part of the mitochondria that we want to cover, and that's this inside portion. The inside portion that we see that is all blue, where we have various different components within there. That is known as the mitochondrial matrix. And this is the site of the citric acid cycle, as well as oxidative phosphorylation. So this takes place via the action of protein complexes that are embedded within this inner mitochondrial membrane. And we will talk about this when we talk about ATP production, and we'll go a little more in depth about aerobic respiration. So to go back to the point where we saw that the outer and inner membrane are composed of phospholipid bilayer, right? We have this hypothesis known as the endosymbiotic origin hypothesis. And this was discovered or pioneered by a 20th century biologist named Lynn Margulis. And according to this hypothesis, right, the mitochondria itself was basically thought of to be its own independent organism before it was actually engulfed by another cell. And once it was engulfed, they had a symbiotic relationship. The mitochondria helped out the cell that engulfed it, and the cell itself helped out the mitochondria. So in this way, the cell itself has evolved to now become a part of the cell and its function. And what it does is it provides energy. We know that it provides energy for our cells. So this is a really, really broad and simplified explanation of the mitochondria. We covered the various components and the functions that the mitochondria is responsible for, especially its function as the energy producer. And the energy molecule is known as ATP, otherwise known as adenosine triphosphate. We also talked about the 3 different forms that we can produce energy, and requiring 2 different types of macromolecules, carbohydrates and fatty acids or fats. We talked about the citric acid cycle and oxidative phosphorylation, which takes place within the mitochondrial matrix. And then we also talked about beta oxidation that also helps produce ATP. We also covered that the mitochondria has its own DNA known as mitochondrial DNA. And this makes sense based off of this endosymbiotic origin hypothesis that we also talked about. So that is it for today. I hope this video was helpful. Please continue liking and subscribing and sharing these videos. And we're hoping that these help learning become a little easier as we're trying to simplify these concepts down to make it very, very easy to understand. If you guys have questions, comments, please leave them in the comments, and we will do our best to reply to them in a timely manner. But other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Everyday A&P. Alrighty, take care, everybody.